If things don't change, I will not change. It's a situation for every player. If you do the maximum and right things, you will use every player. You can see on the bench, we miss a bit of pace on the bench, but I would still put Vital for a player who doesn't give the maximum every day. This statement was made by Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim following his team's 1-0 win over Fulham at Craven Cottage in January 2025, during which he implied that he would rather select 63-year-old goalkeeper coach Vital Jorge over Marcus Rashford. This statement came after being asked about the availability of Rashford, a player whom at the time had not been in the team's matchday squad for nearly 2 months. Rashford for the longest times had been Manchester United's golden boy, heralded as one of the players to lead the club in its bid to restore its former glory following the incredible brace against Arsenal in his Premier League debut, and for several years after that, being a Manchester United academy product, was the face of the club. In a period when the managerial seat was its hottest, big players getting into all manner of controversies, conflict within the dressing room, managers against players, players against other players, Rashford persevered through it all. He was largely, for most of his time at the club, unproblematic. That was until he was. How did Rashford go from golden boy to unwanted so drastically? This is the heartbreaking decline of Marcus Rashford. In February of 2016, in a crucial home game between Manchester United and Arsenal, Marcus Rashford will announce himself to English football, scoring 2 goals on his Premier League debut, a 3-2 win to down Arsene Wenger's Arsenal. 3 days before twice sending Old Trafford into an earth-shattering frenzy, he twice scored in Manchester United's Europa League round of 16 clash against Midtjylland, helping them to a 5-1 victory. But it was here, in this historic clash, that many took notice of the 18-year-old Manchester United Premier League debutant. It didn't stop there though. The following month, he became the youngest goalscorer in the history of the Manchester derby. Rashford, born October 1997, grew up in a single-parent household in South Manchester. His family was broke, leading them to rely on free school lunches and food banks, an experience which would later inform his future philanthropic endeavors. He had been in Manchester United since the age of 8, growing up in the club during its quote-unquote glory days. Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in Europe and arguably the biggest in England, depending on who you ask, was going through a painful period of transition at the time he burst onto the scene, so it was always going to be difficult for him. They lost their long-time manager, the major reason for the club's over 2-decade-long success, Sir Alex Ferguson, and his immediate successor was nothing to write home about. Seeing such a painful and dominant football giant fall at the weight of the problems a legendary manager like Ferguson, using his wisdom and experience, was able to temporarily fix, the fans grew anxious. Anxiousness gradually morphed into disappointment. Disappointment morphed into frustration, and frustration morphed into anger, and the anger of the Red Devils was such that could transform the theatre of dreams into a cemetery of nightmares. Rashford was coming into this environment hailed as the next big thing. His explosiveness and killer goal-scoring instincts was greatly appreciated as the club intended to get back to its previous ruthlessness, a time when coming to Manchester United will frighten even the best of managers. For his age, he had the confidence necessary to navigate through a very tough environment, one where every player's performance were being analysed thoroughly with a huge magnifying glass under the biggest spotlight imaginable. His first season would end with 5 goals in 11 appearances and an England call-up. By the summer of 2016, Jose Mourinho became manager of Manchester United, and with him came the most expensive player in history at the time, Paul Pogba. It was on. It was serious. Knowing Jose and what he often demands from his players, Rashford and co knew they had to buckle up. It would be an absolute lie to say Mourinho did not present an existential challenge to players like Rashford. First, he was young, and Mourinho was not exactly known for trusting young players. This would even lead to the question about where Rashford would play and how he would play. Although versatile, Rashford at the time was primarily a striker. However, Mourinho got himself Zlatan Ibrahimovic to fill this role, a striker with completely different skill sets to the Englishman. He was also experienced too, having played in the likes of Barcelona and the 2 major Milan clubs at the height of their powers. By contrast, Rashford was a raw young talent that still needed quite a bit of nurturing to develop. This would require an ecosystem that would be patient and nurturing, which Manchester United's appointment of Jose Mourinho did not suggest it was serious about fostering. It suggested they were interested in results to placate a disgruntled fan base who painfully watched 3 years of decline post-Ferguson. Also, Mourinho's rigid, defensive style of play presented yet another challenge, as it was widely believed to stifle the creativity of his players. This issue would eventually contribute massively to his downfall at the club, causing friction with star players like Paul Pogba. Nonetheless, Mourinho was good with Rashford. He found room for the Englishman on the flanks, mostly on the left, and he flourished. His pace and goal scoring became the most important tools he had, contributing immensely to a counter-attacking system that required very fast, quick-thinking players to travel to the box and a cold, clinical finisher to complete the move. He provided 11 goals and 5 assists in 53 appearances across all competitions, including a start in the Europa League final against Ajax. In the summer of 2017, Manchester United would bring in Romelu Lukaku from Everton. The 2017-18 season was not one that went too well for the club, as despite a second-place finish, they were outclassed by their city rivals at the top of the table. A second-place finish is generally considered fine, but for a club like Manchester United, not quite. Rashford, who actually got himself above Anthony Martial in the pecking order, would see his game time reduced from January onwards due to the arrival of Alexis Sanchez. 13 goals and 9 assists in 53 appearances were the numbers he put out, developing steadily but with performances still riddled with inconsistencies. The beginning of the following campaign will be catastrophic for the club. Poor performances, needing last-gasp goals to mask the team's terrible showings, off-the-pitch drama between players and managers as Mourinho began to tear into his players, some of them doing the same back, would culminate in a managerial sacking in December 2018 after a 3-1 defeat to Liverpool. With Mourinho gone, in came Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and my goodness, Rashford was unleashed. He became one of the best players in Europe during the first few months of Ole's reign, scoring beautiful goals, providing world-class assists, and even pulling off unbelievable skills. The game changed and the players were all flourishing. Paul Pogba, Jesse Lingard, players who were scorned during Mourinho's reign were firing in all cylinders. It was evident that in the attack, Rashford was Ole's main man despite the presence of Romelu Lukaku. A Manchester United side whose season was previously thought to have fallen off a cliff managed to pull off an incredible comeback against Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League. Rashford, scoring the winning penalty in that match, began gaining comparisons with Kylian Mbappe, who at the time was touted as football's next big thing. Rashford became indispensable to his manager, often being the face of his team, but unfortunately, this would come at a cost. Rashford was in his early 20s during Ole's reign, playing in one of the most demanding clubs in world football. The fans needed wins. They needed a return to the glory days, and Ole's team was falling short on that. Yes, they finished second in 2020-21, with Rashford contributing 11 goals and 13 assists, but watching the title race be mostly fought between Liverpool and Manchester City, two of the Red Devils' biggest rivals, by the way, was not something they could stand to see happen for a long time. The club even lost the Europa League final to Villarreal, with one of the major scenes after the final being Rashford sobbing on the bench. Just one look at the Manchester United team at the time, at least compared to the standards of Liverpool and Manchester City, did not imply they could be title contenders, and yet still, Ole did the best he could and Rashford was central to that. The team was essentially punching above its weight. More power was needed, more consistency was needed. The best in the team had to play consistently even through injury until it broke him. It was 11 July 2021. The Euro final between Italy and England went into penalty shootouts in Wembley after finishing 1-1 after extra time. Rashford, Sancho, Saka, three of the three Lions' best young attacking players stepped up to take penalties in the penalty shootout when their country needed them the most. All three of them missed. The result: no trophy for England and a barrage of racist abuse sent their way. This was a massive low point for Marcus Rashford. It was then revealed that Rashford had been playing through injuries for months. He would undergo shoulder surgery that summer, where he was set to miss the first few months of the following season. Something else also happened that summer that shook Old Trafford down to its foundations, and that was the arrival of Cristiano Ronaldo. While the 5-time Ballon d'Or winner was the main headliner of the club's summer business, Jadon Sancho also arrived from Dortmund. These were attacking players who would provide competition for Rashford in the team. The 2021-22 season, however, ended disastrously for the Red Devils. Ole was sacked, the club finished outside of the top 4, and Rashford only managed 4 goals and 2 assists in 25 Premier League appearances. There was chaos and disunity in the squad. Players like Ronaldo making multiple headlines leading to conversations about the club and player culture and how drastically things had changed since Sir Alex Ferguson. For Rashford, things got better the following season. A lot better, in fact. In a Manchester United team now under former Ajax manager Erik ten Hag and would finish third in the league, Rashford will enjoy arguably his best season, scoring 17 goals and providing 6 assists in 35 league matches, 30 and 12 in 56 in all competitions. Although not a bad season for the club on paper, they also won the Carabao Cup. The team that finished above them, Arsenal, marked yet another major title contender for Manchester City besides them and Liverpool. They were expected, especially after all the money spent to realize Ten Hag's project, to mount a serious challenge the following season. In the same summer, riding off of the hype of his wonderful 2022-23 season, Rashford would be given a new contract which would see him earn £325,000 a week. At age 25, this contract was huge. It validated his status at the club, signifying his increased importance. However, this would be the beginning of the end for him. Rashford, a player who had previously built goodwill off of his humanitarian and philanthropic efforts, becoming a role model for kids all over, was beginning to turn. After spending his summer holidays partying, the Manchester United forward began the season not as motivated as usual. Now, footballers partying isn't a new thing and shouldn't be considered as a bad thing most of the time. Players can choose to spend their free time doing whatever they like, but it starts to become a problem when the actions of the player indicates they prioritize that over the happenings on the pitch. Understanding the nature of British media, this can literally break not just the player's image, but their careers. Just hours after a painful 3-0 defeat to Manchester City in the Manchester Derby, Rashford went partying at a nightclub. His manager wasn't best pleased, making him apologize for his actions and even diffuse things in front of the media, helping salvage his reputation. 2 months later, however, he went out 2 nights in a row in Belfast, missing training in the process. The media was merciless. Tales about his exploits in casinos in Manchester's Chinatown district, playing poker and knocking back beers, were plastered all over the papers. Media sources would refer to his house as a party house. All these headlines, as you would imagine, infuriated supporters. The club's player culture yet again was brought into question. It seemed like players could just do whatever they liked with no senior players to guide them properly. He was going through certain things in his personal life too. The separation from his childhood sweetheart, Lucia Lloyd, whom he had even gotten engaged with. There was also the death of his cousin Nathan, which followed that of a good family friend Garth in 2022 that his mother revealed he had been struggling with. Following Ten Hag's sacking after a poor start to the 2024-25 season and 8th place league finish preceding it, Ruben Amorim got the job, and he was not going to have it with Rashford. He froze the Englishman out of his team completely, citing a lack of effort in training, added with a suggestion that a 63-year-old will probably be above him in the pecking order. Although harsh in the way the information was relayed, it wasn't like Amorim was saying all of this out of nowhere. Fans have long criticized the Englishman's work rate, with several of them, including club legends, branding him as lazy following their woeful performance against Newcastle United in December 2023. The forward was able to breathe just a bit, going on loan to Aston Villa to regain his form. When players like Scott McTominay, Romelu Lukaku, Antony, Jadon Sancho are doing well outside the club, it begs the question, what is it about Manchester United that makes players fumble? It could be the pressure, the media, and the club culture, and so on. After being linked with several other clubs, it was recently announced that Barcelona secured a loan deal for him. It remains yet to be seen how he's going to perform over there.